This week, we discuss new FCC regulations on consumer routers, defining what a router is, and how to tackle security issues associated in general with network devices. Stay tuned. Below the Surface, coming up next. Welcome to Below the Surface. This is episode number 71, being recorded on Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. I'm Paul Asadorian, joined by Mr. Chase Snyder. Chase, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Good to be here.
Mr. Vlad Babkin is here with us. Vlad, welcome.
Hello.
And special returning guest, Josh Marpet, is here with us. Josh, welcome.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciate it.
You're internet famous. We'll get to that after a quick announcement. Below the Surface listeners can learn more about Eclipsium by visiting eclipsium.com/go. There you'll find the ultimate guide to supply chain security, an on-demand webinar I presented called Unraveling Digital Supply Chain, Threats and Risk, a paper on the relationship between ransomware and the supply chain, and a customer case study with DigitalOcean. If you're interested in seeing our product in action, you can sign up for a demo. All that at eclipsium.com/go. So these new FCC regulations are sparking much debate. I'll let Chase and Josh kind of kick off what led to the topic of this podcast. There is a video short that we recorded at RSA on the Eclipsium YouTube channel that now has, as of right now, 267,000 views, 3.3 thousand likes, and 309 comments.
Where you're seeing different numbers than me. I see 418,000 views.
Oh, really? Do I need
That's
to refresh?
crazy. Okay.
Wait. Maybe I didn't refresh.
Smash that refresh.
Oh, no,
button.
you're right. I stand corrected. Let's do that again. 418,000 views, 5.9 thousand likes, and 471 comments.
We're gonna hit 500,000 on that thing, Josh. I'm confident.
It's crazy. So, guys,
Yeah,
tell us the gist of the video for our audience that hasn't seen it yet.
Chase, you want to take it or you want me to?
Yeah, let's go. Okay, so we were debating, the FCC published this router ban. They updated the covered list to include foreign routers not made in the USA. It got a huge flurry of news. We were debating whether or not to even write about it. Because Eclipsium would talk about hardware supply chain. So it's in our wheelhouse, but it's already so noisy. We the news, it's already happening. But we're at RSA, and I had a camera and little microphones, and we were doing Subway Takes style mini interviews about topics of the moment with various people. Josh, friend of the pod, friend of Eclipsium, stops by the booth, and we're like, oh yeah, this is great. I've never met you before in person. Now I have. It was a delight. And we decided to do one of these interviews just in front of the booth, and we talked about the router ban. And we talked for I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes probably. And something that you said that totally resonated to me was that anything in your home, like a TV, a smart TV that has RJ45 connectors, that has Wi-Fi cards in it, that's a router, or it could be. We posted that clip on YouTube. We chopped out. It's less than a minute long.
And the internet exploded.
And the comment, we're violating rule number 1 by reading the comments, but they're actually great. And I think in good faith, there's some good faith arguments on there that we should address. But yeah, okay, so we're over 400,000 views. People have opinions about what counts as a router. And to me, that indicates that the original documentation, the FCC public notice that they put out, and the documents that they reference, the NIST IR document, which you quoted off the dome, off the top of your head, the exact section where they define what a router is. That stuff has sort of some language in it that is apparently up for debate amongst at least the YouTube commentariat.
It's more along the lines of is that my definition of a router and your definition of a router, and probably most of the commenters' definition of a router, is a device that routes packets from one network to a different network, and it operates at layer 3, and so it operates at the packet level, and it has rules that it routes the packets by, and there's a lot of different features of a router, right? Now, you could say, well, that sounds like a firewall to a certain extent. And yes, I mean that's effectively a layer three a router. A layer three router, by the way, is a layer three switch a router? We're not going to get into that at the moment.
Yeah.
But a router operates in much the same way that a firewall does by allowing packets to pass from the green network to the red network. If it has this flag on it or whatever, there's lots of different rules it follows. So, and we go, okay, that's a router. And we all go, yeah, that's a router. But the definition that was given was simply any device that routes packets that sends packets from
I
one
have the
network to another.
I have the definition here, at
Go
least
ahead.
one of them. Consumer grade networking devices that are primarily intended for residential use and can be installed by the consumer. They say routers forward data packets, most commonly Internet Protocol IP packets, between networked systems. And so I had this other definition that I'm like, anything can be a router, provided it has this criteria, kind of keying off what the FCC and the definition from the National Institute of Science and Technology states. In my definition is if it's a device that can run Linux, let's just say, or any operating system, Linux most common, and it has more than one network interface, can become a router. I'm not saying it is a router, right? Josh, you had the very sensational statement that TV is a router.
Yep,
It
is.
could become a router. TVs have a Wi-Fi interface. They have a network interface. They run an operating system, Android, Linux, in variations. And with just one command in Linux, that becomes a router. You tell the kernel that it can route packets between interfaces with sysctl dash w IP underscore forward equals 1. That's not the exact syntax, but pretty close. You run that command,
Vlad
and it
looks
tells the
angry at you.
kernel, right? Tells the kernel you can route between interfaces, effectively turning it into a router. I also posted from the Eclipsium account an article that says the title is How to Turn Anything into a Router, which,
Yep.
I mean, we've done since the dawn of Linux, basically, right? You could take anything and make it your firewall / router for your house. I used to use an old PC. And there's millions of different devices that
Untangle
can do
and
this.
Viata
Right.
OS, and there's a dozen different things that would Firewall, I think, released a way to do that on. You
Yep.
just had a box with multiple NICs in it, and you were good. And you wanted to do that for your wireless? Okay, as long as it has a Wi-Fi card, we're good there too. It's absolutely crazy
I mean, your phone,
because
I mean, comments are pointing out your phone, if you put it in hotspot mode, is a router,
right.
right? Yes.
Vlad, go
Actually,
ahead.
one question. How did they word the regulation? Because if they worded it as in it is intended to be a router, that's one thing. But if they worded it as that it
Is
can be a router,
capable.
that's a yeah. Because
Yeah,
like
You read it?
literally
They did, yeah.
anything that runs Linux de facto
Yeah.
can be a router. It's not
And
very
that's the
hard to
problem.
do.
Yeah, Vlad, you very astutely point out that's the problem is the FCC did not clarify intention of the device, which is something I'm
Right.
recommending the FCC issue guidance on to say that it has to be intended for as a residential gateway or router and not some other consumer electronics device that would not be the primary gateway for your home, or
Okay,
clarify it with some language.
but if the point of the router ban is to mitigate cyber risk, which it is,
Yes.
it
Yeah,
references
Ostensibly,
We'll get
yes.
to that, but
yeah, it references, Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon. It says there has been attacks on American citizens in their own homes using their small office and home office routers. If the ostensible purpose is to mitigate cyber risk, then the intent of the device doesn't matter that much, because if you
Right.
can turn it in with minimal
Work.
non-sophisticated malware could do this at scale and just worm through it, like botnet all the TVs. It could be done. So it's
Mirai.
like, if the intent of the thing is to mitigate cyber risk, then the language in it should indicate that. But arguably the stated intent is at best incomplete and at most
Well,
just
here's
different
some
than the
interesting
actual
facts.
intent.
So the FCC largely regulates layer 1, right? If you want to sell a device in the US and it does any type of radio frequency communications, you have to submit it to the FCC. They put it through a testing lab to make sure there's basically the primary intent is to make sure it doesn't interfere with other devices and transmits on the radio frequencies that are documented, and they test that in the lab. With this regulation, they're kind of stepping outside of the hardware, right, and going, well, devices that route packets. It's like, well, wait a minute. Now you're talking about layer 3. You're beyond layer 1 in the hardware at this point, which is my first interesting factoid. The second one is the ability of this regulation to actually improve the cybersecurity. The regulation states that you will not be allowed to sell hardware in the US of a router if it is manufactured overseas. Now, I take that as like Mexico and Canada are okay because that's not overseas.
No,
but
it says foreign technically, but so
is that what it says? Foreign? I
yeah,
thought
it says foreign.
Yeah. But in
think
any
so.
case,
Foreign.
like, let's recall how many cybersecurity incidents can be attributed to hardware backdoors that have come from a foreign country. We have the Cisco example. We have evidence that the counterfeit Cisco devices have had hardware backdoors. Okay. We have that. I have not seen any evidence that these consumer-based devices have a hardware backdoor that has led to significant cybersecurity events. In fact, I don't even recall any. The one that I could recall was it Nano KVM had the microphone on their IP-based KVM.
Yeah.
That
was
wasn't
that was Nano or
backdoor.
Jet?
That was one. No, it was Nano. It was Nano. It wasn't
Okay.
Jet. And so that kind of, sort of, right? But that was not used in any of the Typhoon or similar campaigns. The Typhoon and the similar campaigns are preying upon software or firmware weaknesses in these devices. So it doesn't, I don't care. So I guess the elephant in the room is I don't care where the hardware is manufactured or where it comes from. The security risks that we're incurring from this are in the software, not the hardware.
I'll make it even more evil. Like, let's say I become an evil Vlad for a second and like wear my evil hat. And like, okay, let's say I'm a foreign intelligence service. I have money and resources to do some intelligence. And I had this TP-Link company, which was in my pocket, which was pretty much spying on US consumers. Let's assume they presume this is the case. Well, now TP-Link routers are all banned because they're all manufactured in China or wherever the hell they are. Well, I'll just create a new company called US Link, which will manufacture routers in US and install my software, which I will deliver from my lab wherever I am and put on those routers. And now they're de facto US manufactured. Firmware is like flashed in the US. It's all great. The software is manufactured in China, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
And now I have a US
Because-
Link company which will sell routers slightly pricier and market it as a like 100% US product.
Yeah, but that's a great point, Vlad, and begs the question, do all of the components have to be manufactured in the US? Or can the
It's
components be manufactured somewhere else? But also, I think it's an important distinction which components. Obviously, the SoC chip, right, system on a chip that comes in your router, is the primary chip that we're concerned about. Maybe if that has the radio, on it or not, there might be other chips. There might be
Wait.
spy flash chips. But hold on, what about the capacitors and resistors in the board, which have absolutely zero impact on cybersecurity? Maybe safety, like if a capacitor blow or whatever, right? But have zero impact on cybersecurity. These are passive devices with no intelligence. You're saying now we have to manufacture all the capacitors, resistors in the boards in the US? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think the premise there is that if it's manufactured abroad in a geopolitical adversary, that even if it's one of those type of passive capacitor, what they're going to do is embed some other little thing in it that's somehow not going to get detected.
Oh, dear God.
Throughout the supply chain.
The likelihood of that,
I know, but
is so not even grounded in reality. Like, you got a firmware that has command injection and auth bypass on it. Like, that's
Paul, it gets even worse. Like, if you think about it, small manufacturers who have to source every component in the US will probably do it for higher price than the companies that can
Right.
source it in China. But point is, if I'm an intelligence agency, I can just sell my router under the market price or under the production cost
because you don't have to
because
make
its
a
main value
profit.
for me. Yeah, the profit is not from the router. The profit is from intelligence. So de facto, only like Chinese or like for intelligence manufactured routers will actually be cheap if that's the case, and everything else will be like twice the price simply because they need to make some profit.
Right.
So yeah, the problem. Okay, so by the way, I think it's 65. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's 65% of the hardware bill of materials has to be manufactured in the U.S.
Oh, so
And
they
so
did state the bill of materials with a percentage in the
it was somewhere. I
regulation.
forget where.
Okay.
It was one of the things they called out as one of the
Yeah.
regulations. So not the actual router ban, but one of the things they called out in a footnote or whatever. But even if I'm wrong and it has to be 50% or 100% US, we just simply can't right now. There's no,
No.
I mean, how many chip fabs do you think we have in the US?
Like one. Like
Yeah,
Nvidia
and it's
has one. Yeah. And I think it's
and
just for Nvidia. But also I want you to think about if these regulations, one of the intents is to bring this chip fabrication and manufacturing to the US. We can't do that and meet the demand or supply and demand for these routers. Like just
yep,
I've done some market research. You can go prompt an LLM. How many millions of devices are sold by the top consumer vendors that make consumer-based IoT route, D-Link, Linksys, TP-Link, and the like?
okay.
There are
Let's
millions and millions of chips that
oh,
need to come off an assembly line to produce those routers. It would conceivably take my wild guess 5 to 10 years for us to build that capacity here in the US to be on par with Taiwan
to
and TSMC.
start
Is it
making those. It's
TSMC?
TSMC.
And
To
TSMC in Taiwan.
start making those chips, not to actually complete making those chips, by the way.
Yup.
That's
Yes.
number
And
one. Number two is we've got a limited time span. But Josh,
Mhm.
why? Because they put out a further piece that said that the firmware in any router that is currently being used and is currently approved is going to be disapproved. And is it either January or
2027.
March of
It's March of
2027?
2027.
March of 2027, which means that all the routers, every router you've got in your house
Right,
and
which was all
everybody's got
fine
in
to
every
sell now.
house
Right, they can continue selling those SKUs now is an important point in the
for a
discussion.
year.
For a year,
Yeah,
and they have to develop the firmware in the US. Is that the
No, then it has to meet this. As far as I know, it has to meet the same thing, which is that it has to have, because this is how it started. We are not going to approve or confirm your firmware, so you're not allowed to import it because we don't agree that your firmware will not interfere, will not, will not hurt our radio frequency systems here. But here's the thing: this we're going to go in a few different directions all at once.
yeah,
Routers don't necessarily have to have Wi-Fi.
correct. I
So
mean,
if a router doesn't have Wi-Fi, is the FCC involved at all?
it
if
gets
there
even
are
better.
my understanding is if there's no radio frequency communications, you do not have to get FCC approval to sell that device.
One. Two, there is a whole subculture of make your own router.
Yeah, 100%.
And people will take switches that are layer 3 switches or can be made into layer 3 switches, throw a Wi-Fi card on the sucker and say, I'm done.
Right.
Third, they name Salt Typhoon. Now, look, I get that the consumer grade routers, Wi-Fi routers, are a stepping stone, a relay to critical infrastructure. They're absolutely correct. I get that. That's legit. Okay. So ban the routers. Oh my God. But anyway, Salt Typhoon, which they named as one of the reasons they put this into place. I'm like, I remember that. How do I remember that? Oh, right. That's the group that wrote Jumbled Path that took over every Kalea system at the backbone of every
Yeah.
phone network in the US. These are not consumer grade routers. These are things
Yeah.
the size of like rooms in houses
And
and big racks.
Typhoon's also targeted enterprise gear, as we've documented on our blog, which I think I want to get back to the firmware thing, but also I believe they clarified that it is not enterprise gear right now. There was something like maybe
Household
in the
only.
future. This is household only. So, but you can go on eBay, and I've done this, and buy enterprise grade router, the smallest model router, for around $40 from Fortinet, Avanti makes
Palo
VPN,
Alto.
Palo Alto. I think I've got Fortinet,
Everybody.
Palo
Cisco.
Alto, and Cisco, you can buy that stuff too. And so, like, does that open up the market now? Because they're not beholden to this new FCC regulation. So conceivably, consumers could go buy used or new gear at maybe a similar price point. The newer gear is probably like a brand new Fortinet router. Their smallest model is going to be a lot more than your TP-Link router. But then there's the used market. But that's weird to me. That's very weird to me.
It gets even more. It gets even better. Like, we have consumers with all of these routers already deployed. Like, the regulation says you cannot buy new ones, but it doesn't do anything about whatever hardware is already installed, and it cannot really do anything about it, because even if you tell consumers to just throw it out,
They're not
who's
going to do
gonna pay
that.
for
They're
it?
not going to do
Whatever-
that. There's no incentive
yeah,
to
so
do
just-
that. I've talked about that in the past. There's
Yeah,
no incentive. You have to create
and-
incentives for them to do that.
yeah. And,
Okay,
and,
to
and
me,
even if you
this-
create incentives, you have to create hardware for them to put into, and there is
Right.
no hardware.
To me, the straightforward read of that, if I was going to interpret it in total good faith and be like, this is, they're trying to do what they say they're trying to do here, is that somewhere outside of my classification level, there has become increased paranoia, maybe justified, that currently being manufactured hardware is going to have more backdoors and whatever stuff in it. And so they're not actually worried about what's deployed right now. They're like, geopolitical tension has reached the point where we think China or whoever is going to start really intentionally making routers
That
and
have
such with
hardware
backdoors
I mean,
in it. It's like the ones in the past are not a
Okay.
big enough threat. The ones in the future.
But here's the
That's a
problem.
good faith read.
That makes some sense, Chase. You're right.
It does and it doesn't, because look, they're
I
not
said stop.
stopping. Again, it has to have a Wi-Fi chip in it for it to be certified by the FCC. All I have to do is sell enterprise switches with these hardware backdoors in them, and I'm right past all of these different barriers you're trying to put in the way. If
Totally.
you really wanted to do this right, and because you're trying to keep the household routers from being operationally used as relays to get a critical infrastructure, mandate an approval process that included a firmware and binary analysis of the router, mandate a trusted execution on the routers, mandate that you
Wait,
that
hold
you
on. I'm sorry, John. I have a question though. Is this band saying that when they say routers, they're not defining as having Wi-Fi? Routers,
but
they're
the
saying
the only way they're
route
doing it is
packets.
FCC certification. FCC certification is
but I think
only
they're-
over radio frequency.
But I think they're stepping outside of that radio frequency and saying routers, regardless of whether they have radio frequency communications or not.
I agree with you, but the problem is I think this is why they went after household, because to buy a router for an enterprise, you're not going to buy a router for enterprise with Wi-Fi.
Right.
You're buying a router that does packets over RJ45 or fiber or something.
Let's say it has to have radio frequency communications. What's really hilarious to me is that you could market a router that just does Ethernet, and if the FCC says, well, if it doesn't have RF, I don't care about it, you could sell that in the US. Then you could
Yep.
make a Wi-Fi access point, which is technically a bridge, not a router. It technically does not route packets because it's all in the same subnet. It bridges the traffic from Wi-Fi to Ethernet, does not route it, and it would not classify as a router according to their current definition.
I
Alternately,
agree.
everybody just goes fully wired, and we enter a wired internet only golden age where everybody has
But a Wi-Fi
wicked
access
fast
point,
gaming.
what's hilarious is a Wi-Fi access point is not a router. It's not a router.
I have an ubiquity system, and I have access points that are mesh.
Mm-hmm.
And I like between the very smart access. Some of those access points are amazing these days.
Right, but they're not routing
And
because it's the same.
they're
on the
just
same
bridging over to a
domain. They're
wireless
just
network.
bridging. They're bridges.
Yeah. So the point, but they're bridging. They're moving packets from one network system to another network system. Is that a router?
It's
And
not
this
Well,
is the
let's
problem.
ask the YouTube commenters, because a lot of people made this specific distinction, saying like what he's talking about is a bridge, not a router. So some percentage of the people in YouTube thought about that,
And
and
the problem is
made
that the
the
definition of
distinction.
router from the FCC is moving packets from one network system to another.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's a bridge.
They say routers forward data packets, most commonly Internet Protocol IP packets, but it's not specific enough to make the distinction between a router and a bridge.
So to all the YouTube commenters who commented, "You're an idiot" or whatever, I'm going by the FCC's government definition.
which is
I'm
vague.
not going by the
It's
definition
vague.
that you
Right.
have and that
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
and that we
Exactly.
all have as technologists. I'm
Right.
going by the letter of the law. And by the
And
letter of
it
the law,
is
if
vague.
you have a toaster with an RJ45 and a Wi-Fi card, it's a router.
Yeah. Right. Because it's vague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
And
kind
I'm
of
going
where
to
the
tell the
language of
famous story.
intent
What's
starts
that?
to be meaningful too. The language of
Yeah.
intent starts to be meaningful in there too. And like, I know they have the language in there of intent, but it's only around intended for consumers to be able to install in their homes. It's not about whether it's supposed to be used as a router by their definition or anyone else's. Um, but yeah. So, okay. I don't want to, okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Really quickly, famous story of a coffee machine in a factory. You ever heard this?
Yes.
Original webcam situation or
No. Better,
No.
better,
Okay.
better. They bring, there's an office with internet access and a factory floor with a closed network, right? They bring in a coffee machine, they stick it up in the lobby of the office, they plug it in, and this thing has a little web server in it, so you can tell if the coffee pot's full or not. This is awesome, okay? And they plugged it in, but they couldn't get it in the office. So they realized, oh, this thing has Wi-Fi, so they plug in the Wi-Fi password into it, and so it's now they can tell in the office if the coffee pot is full. It's amazing. The next day they show up and everybody's got ransomware. And then the screaming starts from the factory floor because all the CNC machines have ransomware. Like, how the hell did that happen? It's a closed air gap network. They plugged in the coffee pot with RJ45 and put the
The
Wi-Fi
OT
on
network. Yeah.
to the OT network.
And
And
the
guess
Wi-Fi
what?
to the enterprise network, which has access to the internet.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah,
Bring
look
the
at Vlad,
power.
look at Vlad, look at Vlad. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Technically, I would assume technically that would be a
Yes.
router because they're probably different subnets, and it would have to do some routing.
Ta-da.
But if
I'm
it's
gonna shut up.
Linux, it's Linux got Wi-Fi, got Ethernet, one command, and you're routing
you go.
packets.
Two comments, two words. Network segmentation.
Mm-hmm.
You should learn it sometime. Like, I don't know. All of these. Let's connect a coffee pot to our network with. Oh, hey, in the same network we have all of the OT hardware. Yeah, I did hear at one point a mind-boggling story about such a thing. Not sure if it is true. I remember hearing it a long time ago when there was one dude flying on a plane and he connected to the wired plane network, and he just started scanning around, and he found all of the plane systems which were just in the same network and had no authentication. So de facto he took over the plane, and then the poor stewardess just saw it and was scared completely out of her mind. He didn't do anything, but like when they landed, they literally had a SWAT team just run in and grab the guy, and that's why they
Oh.
started closing off the wired ports. I'm not sure if this story is true, but if it is,
That's Chris
yeah,
Roberts.
network
He's a friend
segmentation
of
is hard.
mine.
Roberts, yeah, it's good
Yeah, he's a friend. He's a friend of
Friend of
ours,
ours.
and
Friend
it's
of
true
ours. So I
story.
feel like it's the mafia. He's a friend of ours.
Oh, it's true then. Okay.
We know some
So
people.
I'm now with the mafia. Okay, perfect.
If you want to meet him, we'll put you in touch. Not a problem.
That's it. I want to go back to March 2027 as it relates to these regulations. Is that FCC saying that they will not, like, even if you got an exemption and you're selling a new router here, or let's say you're not, I'm confused as to what that date means. Does it mean you have to develop the firmware here in the US, or that things that were not approved that everyone's using now, you're not allowed to produce firmware for them? Which, I mean, this could be disastrous, right? This could
They're
be
going to
manufacturers end of
decertify.
lifing and end of supporting everything because they don't want to make the firmware. They're almost making the problem worse. Am I understanding this correctly?
They're decertifying. So right now you can't do any new firmware. Okay, if it isn't already approved, you can't do it. All right, until they
Any
get the
new
conditional
hardware or
approval
firmware,
channel set up.
any new hardware or firmware.
Yes,
The
that's
firmware
correct.
if stuff that's being sold now in the US, you have new firmware for it, that's okay until March 2027.
That's the new thing. If you sell a router right now, it's already approved, it's already good, it's fine, and you sell it in March 2027, you will not be able to sell it anymore. Your firmware, your router, your FCC certification is going to be decertified in March of 2027. And so they're trying to do this to push because they realize that some of these routers have long lifespans. I mean,
Yeah.
how long did the WRT54G get sold for?
In multiple iterations over like 10 years or more.
10 years. So they're like, all right, we don't want these manufacturers to slap a new shell on it and call it a new version of a router, even if it's the same hardware, same firmware, same everything, so they can
Mhm.
keep selling them. So they're like, all right, in 2027, everything goes away. It's a foreign company. And it's like you don't understand. All you're incentivizing is for these manufacturers to stop producing firmware updates because it's not going to
Right.
get certified. You're going to stop producing security patches because it's not going to get certified. You're going to stop producing any new features and any new fixes for all these routers.
So how are they going to regulate if just let's use TP-Link or whatever, they're selling a couple of models now and
Lots of
2027
models.
rolls around and they put out new firmware. Are they going to stop people from downloading it? Are they going to stop manufacturers from distributing it?
Well, if they
How would they
can't sell
control
it,
that?
if TP-Link or any of the other, Fortinet, Juniper, whatever,
Oh,
can't.
I see. It's the other way. If I can't sell those models anymore in the
Why would I
US,
make
I'm
new
not going to
firmware?
produce any new firmware updates for them because I can't sell new ones. So why would I keep producing firmware updates for stuff that no one's going to pay me money for?
Ding,
Anyway,
ding, ding.
yeah, okay.
So it's really tough because they've disincentivized the manufacturers from doing these magic things like producing security updates. I know, crazy,
They've made it
crazy. Why would you
worse.
need?
They made it
Yeah,
worse.
they're making it worse. And so now we have this whole situation where, okay, we're all like, all right, so there's a conditional approval process mentioned in the regulation, but there's no conditional approval process that's been promulgated in any way, shape, or form that I can find. If anybody can find it, please send it to me. Okay.
Hmm.
But I can't find any conditional approval process that's actually out there. So we have no conditional approval process. We have no understanding of what it's going to take to be conditionally approved. I'm sure that router manufacturers are trying to pull together whatever they can to figure. I'll send them a package of firmware that's been checked by any of the half dozen companies that do firmware analysis.
You know what would be
And
awesome? I think this would help move the needle security wise. It would also tremendously help our respective companies uh, that we work for, all of us collectively, if they did a model like PCI. If they said, well, you want to sell a new model and you want to produce firmware for it, that's great. Conditional approval is there's this list of vendors, just like PCI, qualified scanning vendors that you can go to and you can go get your devices certified. That company will produce a report. You'll come back to the FCC and say, look, I got this new model router. It's got this firmware, and it was approved by vendor XYZ that was on your list of conditional for conditional access testing or what have you, and adopt the PCI model
that
of
would be great.
qualifying it. That would be great for
That would be
everyone.
great.
Hey, we'd get better security. I mean, you'd have to define, then you have to create a standard. What is the security standard for these routers, which collectively as a community, we have most of those pieces already. We could pull together a nice standard. It would take us some
We're on
time
the
to agree
board
on
of
it.
the Value Chain Risk
Yeah,
Institute that already has a standard
exactly.
built.
Right. There's standards. We have a standard, and then you have testing harnesses and frameworks that adhere to that standard. You have to certify your testing process. So the FCC would have to then have a process just like PCI, right? To I did this at Tenable. I was actually there when Tenable was applying to be a qualified scanning vendor, QSV, right? And so you have to say, I can test it. Here's the proof that I can test if in PCI world to the regulations. In this case would be I have to prove I can test firmware and hardware to whatever specification and standard we agree upon. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. That would help everyone, I think. I mean, it's selfish of us to think that because
I
obviously our
agree.
respective companies would be on that want to be on that list because anything being sold, we get money to go test it.
And you have to have a way forward. Right now they're saying no,
Oh,
no,
right,
no,
right, yeah, with
but you
no
have to have a
right.
way forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
So
we can't just stop selling routers here in the U.S. This is ridiculous. So then, but like, here's my other thing I've been noodling on. So any computer can be a router, and I think one of the YouTube commenters pointed this out. If you buy a motherboard, it has Ethernet and Wi-Fi. Is is that a router? You can buy. I have them laying around. I've got a bunch of them. They're fanless mini PCs with 4 Ethernets on them. They're not really marketed as a router. They're marketed as a
But as long as
PC.
they've got more than one NIC on them, you've got routers.
So we're not going to be able to buy computers that have more than one network interface on them anymore? They're going to have to go through the approval process for a router?
But
I don't know.
what happens if
If it's got a
what happens
Wi-Fi
if
NIC
you
in it.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Vlad.
What
I'm sorry.
happens? Yeah, what happens if you insert a network interface in it? Like, let's say
Right.
motherboard drives is just one, but then you just buy a card, like Wi-Fi card. Well,
Right.
those are not a router. Neither is this motherboard is a router. So you put them together, and suddenly you get a router.
Right.
You're
You
not
buy a
gonna
kit.
sell it.
Yeah. Right. You buy a kit. You buy the router with no Wi-Fi, and it comes with a Wi-Fi dongle. And when you get it, you're gonna plug it in, and then this is crazy. I can't believe we're having this discussion. Actually, This
Okay,
is
so
crazy.
do we want to air out any of the most fun conspiracy theories about it? Because I asked a bunch of people this question before and after we talked, Josh, and people had some fun takes. There's I mean, one general one that I heard multiple times was that this is a move specifically to either target in a negative way or to help one or two specific companies. And this sort of goes back to the theory that Vlad was bringing up earlier, that some company could, I don't know, thread the needle on the regulations and have like a made in US router company that gets the first and maybe only exception. In the FCC document, it says that it's the DOJ or not the DOJ, the DOD or the DOW that's going to have to do the exception or grant the exception, and they probably would hire a third party that has the ability to analyze hardware and firmware for security properties. I wonder who would do that. So it's like, okay, so this is just the DOW getting their hands in the pie of the approval process for these things that already have tons of approvals that have to go through. And so now it's a tool that could be used to, help out or harm specific companies for whatever reason, security or profit motives or other reasons. So that's a take that I heard that's also present in the comments and that people also said to me out loud in person. I think the most fun, possibly most unhinged conspiracy take that I heard is that the government wants you to use only government approved routers that have that Wi-Fi based motion detection and can like monitor the physical movement of humans that are moving around within the range of them. Which it's true. You can use Wi-Fi for motion detection. They'll even try to sell you this as an add-on service for like $5 a month. Some of the router companies will be like, "Hey, do you want an in-house security system that uses your Wi-Fi signals to detect whether there's a person moving around your house while you're gone?" Which is very funny to me. That seems
the government already has Amazon Wiretap, otherwise known as Amazon Alexa.
The fact
exactly.
is,
why would they do that? There's easier ways.
It's easier ways. Ring. Yeah. The conspiracy theories are running rampant about this, and I'm not gonna comment on any of them because frankly, I have my own thoughts. But the biggest problem is that there's not a clear path or understanding of why this was done in such a way at such a time, in such a strange way to make perverse incentivization. There's not enough time to get this done right. You want to insource? You want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S.? I'm all for it, man.
But you still have to have a plan to replace the tens and millions of routers that are deployed in the US today. That is the problem. And while this addresses maybe the long tail, with the incentives the way it's being structured now, is that new routers will be scarce, hard to get approval, but conceivably now more expensive. So now there's no incentive for any consumer to go upgrade their router, right? If someone's going to go upgrade their router, or maybe is thinking about it, and they go look at, well, now there's only like 3 manufacturers, and guess what? They're $300 a piece because either they had to, increase costs for the process to get approval, or increase cost by manufacturing here in the US. Now your $50 routers are $300. No one's now incentivized to upgrade at all, unless you have what I proposed in the past, is some incentive program for people to replace their routers with something that is more secure, right? So you have to incentivize the ISPs and the consumers and get funding from the government to go, hey, ISP, you've got tens of millions of customers. They've all got mostly insecure routers. You need to have a program where people can upgrade or replace their routers, and the government is going to help subsidize that, help create incentives for both the ISPs and the consumers to upgrade to something that hopefully is more secure, right? That has to adhere to a higher standard of security, and not just where the hardware is made, but actual security in the firmware and software.
The UBI, man, Universal Basic Internet, government
Oh
dole
God, I'm
internet.
going to hit you.
No. It's not regulating the internet. It's an incentive program for people to, when the device that gives them access to the internet has better security than what we have now.
Yeah.
I have not seen anything come from any regulations here in the U.S. that help solve that problem. There have been lots of attempts at, what was it, the Cyber UL, and lots of other attempts like that. None of them have legs to actually fix the issue.
Yeah.
It's
Something I thought about as I was reading this document is that also relatively recently, whenever it was that the EU Cyber Resilience Act came out, that is a document, that's like 100-page PDF with a very detailed sort of set of plans and requirements to
That is
introduce a
how you
little bit
do
more
it.
security into the hardware and firmware, specifically supply chain and the supply chain for digital products. And it also has timelines for enforcement, has very specific penalties. It has teeth, and it has details about how to actually comply with it. And I was like, okay, so there's precedent for like a good supply chain security policy and set of regulations and stuff. And this doesn't quite rise to that threshold, as we've been discussing. And I don't know whether I keep, maybe I'm too internet brain, but I keep thinking, it's like, is this some sort of global geopolitical 5D chess that I just can't really see what the game is that's being played? Or is it just not very good job done on a straightforward attempt at actual supply chain security? And they'll take some time and they'll fix it up. It'll get better over time. They'll iterate on it and it'll get better. Or somehow.
Honestly,
It's what is the quote, like, don't attribute to maliciousness what can be contributed to or
Yes.
attributed to incompetence, right?
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is magic thinking. I think this is, hey, if we ban everything that comes from a foreign country, they'll just build it in country. And the problem is
Yeah,
that
it's
is
not bad.
possible. We can build it in country, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years to get us ready to do so, to start getting ready to do so.
Yep.
It's going to take routers that are close to $400 or $500, which are instead of $80, $120, $160. And that's just punishing people who don't need to be punished.
Mm.
People are going to have to go touch grass, man. They won't be able to doom scroll anymore. That's how it's going to affect me anyways. But
No, you're going to
yeah,
find clubs of people building routers out of weird stuff, which means you're
right.
going to have an even more fragmented infrastructure experience, and you're going to have easier access because the attack vectors against DIY are going to be monstrous.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be a weird hardware landscape out there. The
Yes, it
hardware
will.
environment and the attack surface is going to be more strangely shaped.
Vlad, you were trying to say something earlier.
just thinking all of this, like when you actually ban foreign import, Russia tried that, and it kind of worked for them, but not quite. Like they really wanted to get some like internal chip production and whatnot. Well, they have some kind of chip production, but their own internal manufacturers are telling that their chips are not stable, not usable, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So, like, it will take us like 5 to 10 years to actually start producing something, but it is even like producing
You gotta
something of
perfect it.
quality.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would take much longer. Like
Quality
the only thing,
but it has to be at a reasonable price, which is a great
yeah,
point, Vlad, right? Is that we need
yeah,
quality chips, but again, the
yup.
market is demanding the $50 router. So to get to that quality and put it in a $50 router, that's a huge challenge.
yeah, market will probably like survive as like $100 router instead of $50 router, but definitely not 500 instead of 50. And like again, looking at Russia, they are right now trying to ban all VPNs imaginable and trying to tighten the screws. It's like latest week news. Like I'm just watching that region for like okay, I understand Russian, I can tell interesting
Yeah.
stuff for people. And like this news is very interesting because Russia does not really have replacement for most services. Like for example, they don't have a Discord competitor, they don't have Google Meet competitors, they don't have Slack competitor, etc., etc. So if they just ban VPNs, Russia will axe its own IT infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like they literally are not ready. So in this case, like US is kind of doing a similar thing with routers because like if you axe all of the foreign routers, do we even have large-scale consumer router manufacturers in US who can actually hit the demand? Like, it's the question is like, even if this regulation comes into place, what companies even are left, right? So and so far, I just don't see anything. Like, not on
Okay,
the
I mean,
enough scale where.
we're running under the assumption though that hardware manufactured in the US can't be backdoored. Like it can totally be backdoored in the
I will
US as
refer you to
well.
Cisco
Yeah,
repackaging equipment back in the 90s
right.
so they could put interesting firmware on the hardware.
If you're
y-
concerned, I think I've said similar things in the past. If you're concerned about hardware backdoors, we shouldn't be too as concerned with where it comes from, but the validation process that must be in place
in
to validate and verify that it does not contain any backdoors. And with hardware, it can be very difficult, right? But it's not impossible to have some of
Yeah.
those safeguards.
So, for example, hardware vendors are completely notorious for making their firmware incredibly hard to actually get your hands on. And this
Yeah.
is true for routers, true for cameras, etc., etc. So what you get is usually an encrypted blob. Good luck analyzing that. So maybe if you get your hands on a specific device with some kind of effort and research, you can actually decrypt it. But that's device per device. You cannot do
Yeah.
this update to update. And there is no regulation for that. So if some again Chinese intelligence service decided to pretty much move TP-Link inside US, name it US Link, and install its own firmware, companies like Eclipsium, for example, we would face difficulties because their firmware will come encrypted, and we will have a lot of
Yeah.
fun trying to actually get our hands on it.
You know what's interesting, and it reminded me, Vlad, of if you look at Mirai, the most popular botnet malicious malware, or malware, I should say, that attacks largely consumer-based devices as well as
Yep.
others. Look at its primary infection vector. Does it need to bypass firmware encryption, firmware signature validation? Does it need to even exploit vulnerabilities? No, the number one thing
Default
that
credentials.
default credentials. So we can have
Yes.
the best hardware, no backdoors in the hardware. We can have air quotes secure firmware, but the problem is this is going to still persist because we have this credential problem, default and weak credentials.
By the way, free recommendation for any software vendor, routers, actual software, enterprise software, whatever, don't make a default password ever.
Yeah.
Like, if you're deploying hardware, make sure that your password is arriving with the router packaging, so that like default password is not admin, but admin and something random on the
Right.
router itself. Or for example, if you're packaging software, during the software setup, make a new admin account with a random password. That makes your software like a lot more secure, basically for free.
Yep. That needs to be that. We've talked about this before. Wiping out the default credentials certainly helps, and that's
You can't exploit default credentials if it's run none.
right.
That's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You can still exploit weak credentials, but
Yeah. But if there's literally no default credentials to be found, how do you exploit them?
but many standards and guidelines exist that would govern what the user could set for a password to make sure that it's not easily guessable. Right.
Yep.
We see this with a lot of systems today, like, hey, you need to create an account. Well, I can't create. So let's say I get a router my username is admin, and I want to set the password to admin, it's going to reject that and say, no, you need to have an 11-character password that is, letters, numbers, symbols, whatever.
Two very simple rules. Password must be 8 characters or above, sometimes 10 characters or above, and you should check it against a password word list. Like take RockU,
Yep.
and that's it. Don't implement actual rules for letters, digits, and whatnot. They actually don't help. Like, if you start to check passwords, they're very easy to guess passwords which follow all of those rules, and almost
Right.
uncrackable ones which contain just lowercase letters.
But that's why our findings from the IPKVM research identified as a security finding resilience to password brute force guessing. And that would in combination with stricter password guidelines and rules, making it slower if you're get brute force guessing it. And Jet KVM did that, right? They implement. I think Nano KVM did it as well. They put safeguards in that help thwart the automated brute force guessing of passwords. So technology exists to help solve what we just unearthed as the real problem of default and weak credentials. That's the first, in my mind, the number one problem we have to address. Then you move on to vulnerabilities like the classic authentication bypass and command injection, right? That bypasses a lot of safeguards as well that you could put on your system. I don't care if your firmware is encrypted. I don't care if your firmware is signed cryptographically. Once the router's running, if there's an auth bypass with command injection, all bets, even if you sign every piece of software that's running on that device, I can still execute commands. So,
yep.
So I just found this apparently, and I'm late to the thing, but they have conditional guidance approval now, or conditional approval guidance now.
oh, interesting.
The entire document is about who you are, where you build, and will you move here, not about whether the router is secure.
Yes. I think Larry pointed that out last night. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
So there's an
crazy.
indicator of purpose there. They're tipping their hand about what the point of this thing actually is now.
A manufacturer could get conditional approval with firmware full of backdoors, default credentials, and unpatched CVEs, so long as they have a clean ownership structure and an onshoring plan.
Yep, and it's like two steps backwards, one step forward.
Yep.
Classics.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
It's interesting that we have the solutions, but they're nothing like what the solution is being proposed. Which is just
We
great.
have the right solutions. That conditional approval guidance is the wrong solution.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, also, let's talk about enterprise devices, because those devices were used in the Typhoon campaigns and
Yep.
continue to have software and firmware vulnerabilities that threat actors are exploiting. So we're not going to address that issue. We're just going
Not
to say
according to
we
them.
want you to manufacture in the U.S.
It's basically all about manufacturing in the U.S. And, I'm sorry, but it's important to manufacture in the U.S. I'm all on board with that. Please don't get me wrong.
Yeah, right.
But the big problem is that it takes 5 to 10 years to set up a chip fab. If you want me to build everything else in the US, well, don't you think the chips are kind of important? Like I can build a shell, I can build capacitors, I can build diodes, I can build PCBs, I can build all those in the US with a very minor amount of setup. I mean, yeah, you'll need some money, but you could do it pretty easily, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But the problem is that the chips are the ones that take the longest time with 2 nanometer photolithography. Like, I'm sorry, that takes a while to set those suckers up.
Yeah.
And the only one that I've been in the US, okay, they never opened. They turned it into a data center because they realized they could make more money with the clean rooms in data center mode than they could using as a chip fab.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the incentives are backwards. I want to talk about the enterprise appliances for a moment, because there was a new in the 5 minutes we have vulnerability. Well, it's an old vulnerability from October 2025. I don't remember the CVE. Hold on.
53521.
Thank you. CVE 2025 53521 is in October of 2025, it was a CVSS 6 or 7 or something like that, and it was
Oh,
deemed as authenticated denial of service vulnerability. So required authentication and was deemed a denial of service vulnerability. Now, mind you, we go back in time to last October, that there was about 40 plus advisories or CVEs addressed by F5 as a direct result of their year-long breach that they suffered, where threat actors purportedly gained access to 40 plus knowledge of 40 plus vulnerabilities that had not been disclosed and or patched, and so kind of forced F5's hand to patch these. Now, if you looked at all 40 plus of them, like many of us did, and we said, well, all of them require authentication, so therefore we don't have to rush to fix that. Now, more security mature organizations were like, well, wait, if F5 was breached for an entire year, we really got to go look and make sure that our F5 stuff is good. And many organizations did that, which is good. But many didn't really prioritize patching because, well, it's not, it's not a critical vulnerability until this last week, I believe, when CVE 2025-5321 was upgraded because in the wild, it was being observed that it was being exploited. And it was being exploited without authentication for remote code execution. So wiped out those two criteria. Same CVE is now a 9.3 and does not require authentication and gives the attacker remote code execution capabilities on F5 devices, which is just, now I have not seen the attribution to which threat actor group was observed exploiting this. It was UNC 5221 that's credited with breaching F5. I don't have any evidence that says UNC 5221 is the one exploiting this kind of reborn vulnerability, if you will. But now this goes from something that you probably should have patched to something that if you haven't patched now, you probably already
You're in
breached.
trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble now. And it's dealing with the access policy manager feature in F5, which is kind of like their zero trust feature. I don't know, Chase or Vlad or Josh, if you looked into that feature on F5, it's kind of marketed as their zero trust conditional access policy feature, which tells me it also needs to be exposed to the internet if it's making decisions as to who should access it or not. And so you have to turn this feature on, and you have to configure an access policy on the system in order to be vulnerable. But again, if you're using F5's gear, this is a feature you might be using.
A lot of people are going to policy-based access control.
Yes.
And using open policy agent, using Rego as the policy language. A lot of people are going that way. I was just at RSAC, excuse me. They get annoyed with you if you just say RSA, and I love Jen Easterly, so it's okay, it's RSAC. And open policy ran several events that I went to. They ran great events. Amit Elazari is awesome. She put together a panel of people that were insane. She's all about policy-based access control, her company is, and they have very smart arguments about this. But obviously, to do this, you have to have a policy center. And just like access control or identity management, you have to have a central store of identity. You have to have a central store of policy. If you have a central store of identity or policy, everything has to have internet access to get to it, to get the latest updates on policy. If that's the case, there's a possibility for problems.
Right.
So yeah, everything we do opens up attack vectors and attack surface.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on F5. They're not the first company
to of course
disclose a vulnerability and then have to reclassify it and reassess the risk score or severity score, I should say. Avanti, I believe, has done this, and other vendors have as well have succumbed to this, where they go, oh, we fixed this and it was a low severity vulnerability, or we fixed this and it was a bug and it wasn't a vulnerability at all, only to come out later that it is a vulnerability and or it is a much higher severity vulnerability that is much easier to exploit. And so it's painful to me to think about this process and how we improve it, right? We need better vulnerability and security research to be looking at these in that process when you find a vulnerability, making sure it's classified correctly. And based on historical data, a lot of the major enterprise network edge and security appliance vendors don't have or are not applying their teams that do have that knowledge to this problem, right? If you see that Cisco, I mean, a lot of these companies have great threat and security researchers, but they weren't tasked with, hey, can this actually be exploited? Which is a problem.
Yeah. Um,
So they're relying
it,
on either security researchers like us or threat actors themselves to figure out what they can do with a bug or vulnerability to then go reclassify it. By then it's too late, right? Because this was being exploited. I mean, it's not really a 0 day. I mean, is it like a 1 day, a half, a 0.5 day? Because there was a vulnerability that was published and there is a fix for it, but we just classified it wrong. I don't know what you call that. It's like a 0.5 day.
I saw a slide recently at some conference that was about how the percentage of vulnerabilities that get exploited that are medium risk score, and it's like medium risk score stuff actually gets exploited a lot, but it's not, it doesn't rise to the top of the priority stack for patching, and it creates this weird attack surface. And so it's like yet another wrinkle when vulnerability that gets adjusted from medium to high risk score. It's like
and
you get sort of fatigue. You're like, didn't we patch this already? Did we or didn't we? You get the multiple taps on it.
And oftentimes that's the difference between medium and high is the authenticated versus not authenticated. But if an attacker is in your router end or a firewall, they can sniff packets. I mean, have a demo that does that and is, basically sniffing credentials as they come across the wire. And so
the last thing I'll say is that, honestly, nobody ever gets to the mediums to patch them. So that's why people chain mediums together to get through the Swiss cheese.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I know, I'm sorry, we're slightly over time, but want to thank our hosts today, Josh, Vlad, and Chase. Thanks everyone for listening and watching this edition of Below the Surface. That'll do it for this episode. We'll see you next time.